Hello everyone, I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Get comfortable and relax. Story 1. It was the summer of 2015, and I was 33 years old, unemployed and completely burnt out in Mexico City. Life hadn't exactly gone according to plan. In just a couple of years, everything I had built seemed to collapse. One piece at a time. My best friend had moved back to Europe and I was left in a strange sort of limbo. Too drained to start something new, too awake to ignore how lost I'd become. That's when the invitation came. An online friend I'd met in person a few years earlier offered me a chance to spend a month in his farmhouse in Norway. A work exchange. A few hours of physical labor each day in return for food, a place to sleep and a change of scenery. It sounded ideal, almost too good to be true. I had always wanted to visit Norway. I figured a bit of hard labor might even wake me up from the mental fog I'd been living in. So I packed my suitcase, laced up my boots, and said goodbye to Mexico City the only way I knew how, by getting ridiculously drunk. I arrived in Stavanger, but my suitcase had somehow ended up in Thailand. After the typical lost luggage paperwork and assurances that my belongings would find their way to me, I finally stepped out into the cool Norwegian air. There was Harold, my friend, confused, slightly annoyed, but smiling. He told me later he'd almost left the airport assuming I'd skipped the trip entirely. I guess luck was on my side that day. That night we stayed with some of his friends in a quiet oceanfront apartment in Stavanger. The mood was light. We drank Norwegian beer, passed around a little hash, not my thing, but I didn't judge. I remember feeling relaxed. I hadn't felt that way in a long time. I was in Norway. I had escaped, even if just for a while. The next morning, Harold drove us an hour south to his farmhouse, a remote piece of land near a community called Egersund, or at least I think that was the name. Norwegian places aren't the easiest to remember if you're not used to the language. The land was breathtaking. Wide green fields, a lighthouse drawing the occasional tourist, and the farmhouse itself sitting atop a hill like something out of a quiet countryside painting. A two-story house with a massive barn nearby. Harold lived alone, but there was one more resident. Someone who lived in the basement. The moment I glanced at the basement window, I felt something. Unease, a chill. The window was partially obscured by boxes and papers, and a single webcam pointed directly at the driveway. It was odd, but Harold didn't mention it, so I didn't bring it up. I settled into one of the upstairs bedrooms. The place felt quiet, distant from the world. For a few days it was peaceful. We talked, drank, worked around the property. I was getting used to the stillness. But then the wedding arrived. Harold's son was getting married, and suddenly the house was packed with the bride's family from Bergen. The energy shifted. Friendly, but overwhelming. I didn't mind the noise. It was a nice distraction. But the second night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, I finally met the tenant. His name was Olaf. Harold was fiddling with his new smartphone and told me Olaf could probably help. Apparently, Olaf was the one who bought the phone in the first place. We went downstairs to the basement, and the air immediately felt heavier, dark, cluttered. Every window was covered. Computer parts blinked and buzzed in chaotic piles. It was less a living space and more a junkyard wired for paranoia. Olaf sat in the corner, skeletal and sunken-eyed, his skin pale, his head shaved. He looked older than his years. When he spoke, his voice was uneven, scattered. I'd worked in recovery homes before. I knew that look, that stutter. Olaf had the distinct air of a long-time meth addict, and I knew deep in my gut he was going to be a problem. He fiddled with Harold's phone for a few minutes, then turned to me. He asked if I wanted to see some explicit material. I said no, firmly. Olaf didn't flinch. He simply said, "I don't care if it's gay or straight. I just like watching people get things introduced into them." The way he said it chilled me to the bone. We left. Back in the safety of the upstairs hallway, I asked Harold if he really trusted the man living beneath his home. He shrugged. Olaf wasn't a friend, he said. Just a tenant. An addict The government paid Harold rent on Olaf's behalf, and a nurse visited twice a week to administer his medication. Harold's sister had pulled some strings to keep Olaf from being evicted. It was complicated, but it was manageable, Harold claimed. I tried to forget about Olaf, but he wouldn't let me. He began showing up unannounced. The first time it was to hand me a flash drive filled with illegally downloaded movies. He proudly mentioned the illegal part. The second time, he was high. He said if I ever needed anything, he'd be around. But don't tell Harold he'd been upstairs. He spoke slowly, deliberately, like each word took effort to hold back whatever was boiling beneath the surface. Then came the nosebleed. One morning I was in the kitchen fixing breakfast. I turned around and there he was, Olof, standing in the doorway, bleeding from his nose, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling above my head. He mumbled nonsense. I froze. My hands trembled. I didn't know what would set him off. After an agonizing pause, he turned and walked out, silent, slow. From that moment on, I locked every door every time I was alone. Harold didn't know what to do. He was mad, sure, but his hands were tied. Olaf was technically clean. The government had deemed him fit to live there. His sister, stubbornly loyal, protected him. And so Olaf remained, a shadow in the basement, a whisper in the hallways. The wedding passed, the guests left, and then Olaf started showing up more frequently. He once barged into the barn while I was chatting with Harold's friends and began setting up some device by the window, a DIY gadget, he said, to steal Wi-Fi passwords from nearby networks. I voiced my fear to the others. I said I believed Olaf might try to harm me. They assured me that wouldn't happen, but they also gave me their phone numbers, just in case. Things escalated. Harold and I began arguing, not because of Olaf directly, but because I was ready to leave. I wanted to go to Germany to visit someone I cared about deeply. Harold seemed disappointed, maybe more than I expected. There had been an unspoken hope that we would grow closer, but I couldn't stay. Not with Olaf downstairs, not with Harold, drinking himself into oblivion every night. I had done my part. I had earned my freedom. Then came the final morning, the night before. Harold disappeared to drink. He didn't come back until early the next day. I tried to message him, but the internet was down. Odd, it had never failed before. I reset the router. Nothing. Maybe Harold had turned it off in a drunken sulk, I figured. I shrugged it off, took a deep breath and went about my morning. I had a flight to plan and a talk with Harold to get through. I stepped into the shower, singing to myself, letting the warm water calm my nerves. Then came the bang, a loud slam against the front door, a voice, someone yelling my name. I sighed. Harold, probably, drunk, annoyed, ready to argue. I turned off the water, stepped out, the bathroom door flew open, and there was Olaf. His face twisted in rage, his eyes bloodshot. In his hand, a large utility knife, the kind warehouse workers used to cut boxes. He charged at me, shouting that I was a liar, that I was trying to steal Harold from him, that I was playing games and would be punished. I was naked, wet, cornered. My heart froze, my muscles locked, the room spun. But I remembered my training from Canada, from the recovery house. Make eye contact, keep your voice steady, hands visible, call them by their name. So I did. Olaf, I said calmly, you're the one who's been stealing Harold's silverware. Olaf, Harold isn't your friend. He doesn't want you here. I repeated it like a mantra. Slowly stepping forward, each time Olaf stepped back, until he was outside the bathroom. And I slammed the door. I pressed my body against the bathroom door, heart pounding, sweat mixing with water on my skin. Olaf screamed, cursed, punched, and kicked the door, a torrent of rage and madness that echoed through the tiny farmhouse. I remember praying, though I'm not religious, begging whatever force might exist to hold that fragile door in place. There was nothing in the bathroom I could use to defend myself. No window to climb through, no heavy objects, just walls, a mirror, and my own trembling limbs. Then came a final brutal kick. the kind you feel in your bones, and silence. I held my breath, listening for movement. Nothing. Just the echo of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I stayed there for 20 more minutes, frozen in place, unable to move, or think, or speak. I didn't even cry. I just kept pressure against the door, as if he might come back at any moment. Eventually, I gathered the strength to unlock the door and move. Every inch of motion felt unreal, like I was moving underwater. I rushed upstairs, threw on my clothes, and escaped through the window into the garden. I knew Olaf could hear movement on the first floor, and he had that stupid camera pointing at the driveway. I wasn't going to risk the front door. I jumped the fence, ran around the house, and made my way to the barn. I banged on the door, shouted Harold's name, but there was no answer. He was still drunk, still out of reach. I needed help, so I sprinted through the fields to the next house, Harold's sister's place. I rang the bell with shaking hands. When she opened the door, I tried to explain what had happened. She didn't speak English well, but my body, my tone, my eyes must have said enough. Her face shifted from confusion to terror. She stormed past me, marched straight into the farmhouse and went down to the basement. I stayed behind with Harold, who had finally come to his senses. I was shaking, talking too fast, trying to make him understand what Olaf had done while had narrowly escaped. Harold listened, then he went after his sister. I don't know what happened down there, I just remember the yelling, the chaos. Then Olaf was dragged out of the house and taken away in a car. Harold stayed with me for the rest of the day. I drank beer after beer, but no matter how many I had, I couldn't get drunk. I couldn't get calm. I couldn't forget. Harold told me later that Olaf had admitted everything, that he knew I was planning to leave, that he had been using drugs all night, and decided he needed to protect Harold by cutting off the internet, waiting until I was in the shower and attacking me. He had planned it all, not in a frenzy, not in a moment of delusion, but with intention, with purpose. That night I stayed in the house. Harold kept watch, sitting guard with a wrench in his hand, and I slept fully dressed. Every noise made me flinch. Every creak of the floor sent my heart racing. I held a screwdriver in one hand all night, just in case. The next morning, we went to the police to file a report. They listened, took it seriously, but you could see the disbelief in their eyes. Things like this didn't happen in peaceful little Norwegian towns. Not here. Not in the land of fjords and friendly faces. But they believed me, took my information, asked if I had a place to go. I did. Germany. I was already planning to leave. That flight couldn't come fast enough. The last day in Norway was quiet. Harold and I barely spoke. He told me sheepishly that in a drunken stupor he'd told Olaf I was leaving, that he was sad about it, that Olaf must have taken it as some kind of betrayal, some twisted justification for violence. That was when Olaf cut the internet and decided to go upstairs to do his job. That was the phrase he used. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I left Norway and tried to move on. The police said I could testify via Skype if the case ever went to trial. But the months passed and nothing happened. When I followed up, Harold told me the case had been dropped. Lack of evidence, they said. Olaf was back in the basement. Back in that house. Back in the same damn place. I was furious at first. Not just at Olaf, but at the system that let him go. At Harold's sister who enabled him. At Harold for drinking too much and letting me walk into that house without knowing the danger lurking beneath. At myself for ignoring my gut. But over time, even anger fades. There's nothing left to burn after a while, just smoke and memory. These days, I try to focus on the present, on the small gifts of each day. The sunrise, a moment of laughter, a walk without fear. But the shadow never fully leaves. I still scan my surroundings, still study strangers, still feel a sense of dread when I take a shower, especially at the gym. I can't help but wonder, what if he hadn't hesitated? What if I hadn't remembered my training? What if I'd panicked? What if he had succeeded? I pictured the scene. A cold bathroom. A lifeless body. Discovered hours later. That could have been me. That almost was me. I don't know how to erase that thought. I don't know if I ever will. But I do know this. Olaf is free. Still somewhere out there. And I never ever want to see him again. Story 2. In the spring of 1995, when the mornings were still crisp and the air smelled faintly of pine, I developed a routine that brought me a strange sense of peace. Every day, just after the first light of dawn, I would drive from my apartment in Atlanta to Stone Mountain Park. It wasn't far, maybe 25 minutes if traffic cooperated. I liked getting there early, before the crowds, before the noise of the day could take hold. My ritual was simple but intense. I'd start with a 5-mile jog around the base loop of the mountain, using the steady rhythm of my steps to clear my mind. Then I'd push myself further, sprinting up the steep, rocky face of the mountain once or twice. It was my way of staying fit, sure, but more than that, it gave me clarity, solitude, focus. That part of Stone Mountain, the side near the main entrance, had a path worn smooth by thousands of feet over the years. It wasn't an beat, 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 you fuck, beat. Official trail, not really. Just the one rocky stretch that people used to go up and down, offering enough traction for sneakers but still demanding enough to make your legs burn. In those early hours I'd usually be alone. Occasionally another early bird would appear in the distance, but for the most part it was just me, the sky, and the steady sound of my own breathing. I remember one morning more vividly than any other. The sun hadn't fully risen and everything was bathed in soft pastel light. I was about a mile or two into my jog around the loop, enjoying the quiet, when I noticed a white van driving slowly by. It was one of those big cargo vans, no windows on the sides, just 2 solid doors in the back. Something about it caught my attention. It moved deliberately, like it was watching, not just passing through. Still, I didn't want to overthink it. People drive odd vehicles sometimes. Maybe it was maintenance, maybe someone was just lost. I kept jogging, letting the thought drift away like a leaf on a stream. But then, minutes later the van came around again. This time, it approached from behind and drove past slowly, much slower than before. My senses immediately sharpened and an edge of awareness crept into my limbs. I turned my head slightly to get a better look, but the van kept going, disappearing around a bend in the road. Again, I told myself it could still be nothing, just a strange coincidence. I was in the middle of the woods, after all. Maybe there was a logical reason. Then it came back, again. This time it pulled ahead of me, just far enough to settle uneasily into my path. I stopped running and stood still, heart now thudding not from exertion, but from a growing inescapable alarm. I watched as the back doors of the van suddenly swung open. No one stepped out right away, no sound, no voices. I remember this vividly. The way my body seemed to make the decision before my mind caught up. I knew instantly that I couldn't run back down the road. If they pursued in the van, I wouldn't stand a chance. There was only one option: up. I turned and ran straight up the mountain. Not the smooth trail, not the part meant for people. I went into the rocky, brush-covered steep part, the kind of terrain that demanded every ounce of focus just to stay on your feet, the kind of climb that left your lungs raw and your legs trembling. Behind me, I heard someone following. They were close, fast, but not fast enough. I dodged trees, scrambled over jagged stone, and pushed myself harder than I ever had in my life. I didn't look back. I didn't scream. I didn't stop to think. Every instinct in me screamed to move, to get higher, to disappear into the forested slopes where no van could follow. After what felt like forever, though it was probably only a minute or two, the sound of pursuit faded. Still, I didn't slow down. I climbed until my legs gave out beneath me and I collapsed onto a flat stretch near the summit. The sky was wide and pale above me, the wind cool against the sweat on my face. I was scratched, scraped, out of breath, but I was safe. I lay there, heart racing, waiting for any sound that might mean they were still looking, but the forest was quiet. Eventually, I stood and walked down the other side of the mountain, back onto the official path. It felt surreal, like I had emerged from one reality into another. The peace of the morning had turned into something sinister, something I didn't have words for. When I made it back to my car, I looked around carefully. The parking lot was empty, no sign of the van, no other joggers, just silence. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors, every nerve still on edge. There was a welcome centre near the entrance of the park, but at that early hour it was closed. This was before cell phones, no way to call anyone immediately. I just drove home, stunned, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't what it seemed, but deep down I knew better. Later that morning, I called the police, told them what had happened, gave them every detail I could recall. The type of van, the behaviour, the attempted pursuit. They listened, took notes, and that was that. I never heard anything more. For weeks afterward, I avoided the park altogether. I couldn't bring myself to go back. My peaceful ritual had been shattered, even after I eventually returned. In the afternoons now, when more people were around, I never felt the same. I started carrying pepper spray. I never ran alone again. I always stayed within sight of other people. That pure solitude I used to love became a thing of the past. I never saw the van again, never got answers, but that moment stayed with me. That primal surge of fear, that clarity that hits you when danger becomes more than a story, when it looks you in the eyes and dares you to run. To this day, I don't know what that person's intentions were. Maybe they were playing a cruel joke. Maybe they were looking for someone vulnerable. Maybe they had done it before. All I know is that something terrible almost happened that morning, and I was lucky enough to run fast enough, smart enough, and hard enough to make sure it didn't. Story 3. It was the summer I turned 12. My world was small then, made up mostly of school days, PlayStation games, and the quiet corners of our one-story house nestled on top of a hill. We lived deep in the countryside, surrounded by wilderness, where the nearest house sat not far from ours, but just distant enough to feel a bit isolated when night fell. My mother, a night shift nurse, worked at a private health clinic that was built on over 600 acres of forested land. It was an upscale facility, the kind of place where patients paid thousands of dollars to stay for weeks at a time and receive personal care for whatever illnesses brought them there. Despite its prestige, the location was often spoken of in whispers. Local rumour had it that the woods surrounding the clinic were known for occult activity, strange gatherings, shadows seen where there shouldn't be any. Of course, I didn't know what to make of those stories at the time. I was 12, I cared more about video games and staying up late than anything else. But I remembered the whispers, the stories my mum would brush off with a roll of her eyes, even though I always suspected she believed some of them. On this particular night, my mum had left for work just after sunset. She always drove the same gravel path that twisted through the woods to get to the clinic. There were no paved roads here, just the crunch of rock under tires echoing through the hills whenever someone drove by. You always knew when someone was coming or going. There was no way to miss it. She had been using a spare key that week. Somehow, her regular set had gone missing, and after a few days of searching, she gave up and grabbed the backup. I remember her mentioning it in passing, frustrated that they'd vanished. But things like that happen, right? Keys get misplaced, life goes on. That night I was in my bedroom, deeply immersed in a game. The blue glow from the screen cast shifting shadows across my walls. My small fan hummed quietly in the background, blending into the soft sounds of a summer evening. Everything felt ordinary, still, safe, until suddenly it didn't. It was hard to explain at first. A feeling, a pressure, almost like something heavy had entered the room without making a sound. I wasn't scared exactly, not at first, but I had this deep, strange urge to turn everything off, to go still, to pretend I was asleep. It wasn't panic, it was instinct. Without questioning it, I turned off the PlayStation, the TV, and my bedside lamp. The room went dark. I lay down facing the wall, pulling the covers up and breathing slowly, quietly. My heart was already racing, and I didn't know why. And then I heard the door open, but not the gravel. No car, no tires, no crunching rock outside, just the creak of the front door, slow, deliberate footsteps on the wooden floors. They were heavy. Too heavy for my mother, and not cautious like hers either. These steps moved through the living room, pausing now and then as though whoever it was didn't know the layout, as if they were searching for something, someone. They made their way into the kitchen, and I heard the light switch click. A soft glow leaked through the crack under my bedroom door, casting a faint golden beam across the hardwood floor near my bed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't flinch. I just focused on keeping my body completely still, hoping, praying that they would believe I was asleep. They didn't move for what felt like an eternity. I could sense their gaze. That eerie, chilling sensation of being watched washed over me in a slow, suffocating wave. The air felt heavier around my face. The room was utterly silent. No movement, no words, just presence. And then, finally, the person turned and walked out. I waited, and waited. I didn't dare move for what must have been at least 20 minutes, maybe more. "20 seconds. I heard the front door again. They'll make more. I heard just thirst. Maybe they were. More hope. Just signed. I was just confused. I didn't know. Maybe they were. The front door again. It opened, then closed. I waited another 10 minutes before I even shifted under the covers. When I finally felt brave enough to grab my phone, I called my mother immediately. "Mom," I whispered, "did you stop home just now?" "No," she said, puzzled. "Why? What's going on?" I told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line lasted longer than I expected. Then, in her calm but firm voice, she told me not to open the door for anyone, that she'd call the police and come straight home. That night changed something in me. It's hard to describe how deeply a moment like that can burrow into your bones. It wasn't just fear, it was the revelation that the world could tilt in an instant, that someone could walk into your safe place without warning and stare down at you while you pretended not to exist. We changed the locks the next day, added a bar lock, reinforced the windows. But that didn't undo what had happened. It didn't erase the image that lived in my mind, the soft glow of the kitchen light, the sound of footsteps, the weight of someone's eyes. Even now, years later, when I sleep in unfamiliar places, I sometimes catch myself listening for footsteps, for door creaks, for silence so thick it hums. We never found out who it was. No windows were broken, nothing was taken. There was no sign of forced entry. That's what made it worse. Whoever it was had a key, and the only key missing was my mum's original set, the one that had mysteriously vanished just days before. I don't know if they had taken it, if someone had watched us, waited, planned, or if it was some random nightmare that just happened to unfold perfectly in a place where no one could hear you. Scream and I'll never know, but I do know that something was off about that property. My mother would never say so out loud, but I saw it in her eyes. We weren't the only ones with strange stories. Lights flickering at night, figures in the woods, whispers in empty hallways. Maybe it was the land, maybe it was just the isolation, or maybe, just maybe, there was something else moving through those woods, watching. Minutes, I wasn't alone. Story 4, there's something oddly intimate about driving strangers around in your car. When I started working for Uber, I thought it would just be a way to make some extra money. A flexible side hustle, nothing more. But what I didn't anticipate was how many faces would pass through my back seat, each with their own story, energy and presence. Most of them were kind, some were quirky, a few were offbeat, and then there were those rare few who left something behind. Not an item or a tip, but a feeling, a lingering unease, a story you can't quite shake. This one happened on an unusually quiet afternoon. The weather was mild, the sun hung lazily behind some clouds, and I had been driving around for about an hour with no luck. I remember staring out at the empty city streets and thinking, maybe I'd just go home early, maybe it wasn't meant to be a busy day. But just as I was about to call it, my phone buzzed. New ride request. The pickup location was an apartment complex not far from where I was idling. I accepted, turned the wheel, and headed there without a second thought. He was already waiting when I arrived. Tall, thin, dressed in a way that was hard to describe. Not quite ragged, not quite formal, just off. There was a mismatched sense to him. He wore a dark jacket, one sleeve rolled up, the other down. His pants were too short at the ankle, revealing socks that didn't match. And then there was his face, calm, polite even, but the kind of polite that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind of calm that feels like a mask. Still, he got in, sat in the back seat. The first thing he did was swing his legs up and rest his feet on the back of the passenger seat. It caught me off guard, but I didn't say anything. He wasn't hurting anything. If he was more comfortable that way, fine. I'd seen worse. I greeted him, confirmed the destination. He nodded, but then quickly said he actually wanted to go somewhere else, a different address. I hesitated. Uwe doesn't like that, and neither do I, but he insisted it was nearby. Just a little. Detour. Again, I agreed. As we started driving, he began giving directions, confusing ones. Turn left here, no wait, stop right, go straight, then backtrack. It felt less like we were going somewhere and more like we were being taken off course on purpose. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to escalate anything. He didn't seem threatening. Yet. Then came the questions. He asked them in a soft, deliberate voice, like he was conducting an interview, like every word was a probe. testing for something. He asked about the healthcare system, about the government, about how people are tracked and monitored. I tried to give vague answers, nothing revealing, just enough to be polite, but the tone shifted when he asked, "Are you afraid to die?" The question lingered in the air, heavier than everything before it. I didn't answer right away, just kept driving, pretended not to hear. But he asked again, his voice more pointed, "Are you afraid to die?" Instinctively I replied, "No, not really." I tried to keep it light, casual, like it didn't rattle me. He didn't say anything in return, just nodded slightly. Then I noticed something odd. He was rubbing something under his nose, a thick, shiny substance, petroleum jelly maybe, but why? The action was methodical, almost ritualistic. The streets we were driving through were unfamiliar now, sparse. I glanced at my GPS. We were no longer anywhere near the original route. Still, I kept calm. Then, finally, he said, "Turn right here. This is it." It was a house. Small, tucked between trees with a narrow gravel driveway that led around the side. I pulled in. The moment we stopped, he opened the door and got out. But instead of walking to the front entrance like a normal person, he turned and disappeared into the bushes beside the house. No word of thanks, no goodbye, just vanished. I sat there in silence for a moment. I looked at the house, at the quiet surrounding it. Something about it didn't feel right. There were no lights on, no signs of life, just this vague sense that something had just walked away from me and into the woods. Something I didn't want to see again. I backed out of the driveway and drove home in a daze. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way he asked those questions, the way he studied me in the rearview mirror, the strange ointment on his face, the confusing directions that took us nowhere I recognized, and most of all, the way he just disappeared into the dark, not like a person going home, but like someone slipping back into another world. The next morning I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just a strange rider, but then something else happened. I got a notification from Uber, a message from the passenger, except it wasn't from him. It was from an unverified number, a text. "I'm waiting outside, come back." My blood ran cold. I hadn't given him my number. Uber masks phone details for a reason. He shouldn't have been able to contact me directly, but here it was, a message asking me to return, asking me to step back into whatever space I had narrowly escaped the night before. I didn't reply. I didn't drive. I didn't even open the Uber app. Instead, I called a friend and stayed on the line until the fear passed. I checked outside every few minutes, made sure every door was locked. I wasn't even sure what I was afraid of, but it was there, crawling under my skin. He never texted again. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he moved on to someone else. Or maybe he was never meant to be part of the normal world to begin with. Just a fleeting passenger, slipping between the cracks, testing people, watching them, waiting for the one who answered his questions the wrong way. I still drive for Uber now and then, but I don't pick up from that part of town anymore, and I don't take detours, ever. If someone tells me to change the destination, I decline the ride, and if anyone ever asks me again whether I'm afraid to die, I'll know better than to answer, because sometimes the people who ask that question aren't really asking at all. Story 5. It was New Year's Eve, and the kind of cold that felt personal, the kind that clung to your clothes, your breath, and the tips of your fingers like it had a score to settle. The party was winding down, music still played inside the house, laughter bubbled from the last few people holding drinks, but the excitement had mellowed into that late-night drowsiness where everything feels distant and soft. We were 5 friends, scattered on the sidewalk in front of the house. Everyone was either tipsy, high, or some unpredictable combination of both, except for me. I'd had a drink or two, sure, but I was easily the most sober, the de facto mum friend of the group. That night, it was my job to make sure we all got home safe. My friend Sarah pulled out her phone and called an Uber. The rest of us bundled ourselves tighter into our jackets and huddled close for warmth. The street was empty. pitch black except for the flickering porch light and the occasional car headlights that drifted by, barely slowing down. Then, a car pulled up in front of us. It didn't have an Uber sticker, but Sarah waved at it anyway. "That's ours," she said confidently. Something in my stomach turned. A quiet little alarm went off in my head, the kind you don't hear but feel. Something was wrong, not just off, wrong. I stepped forward and grabbed Sarah's phone. "Let me check the license plate," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I compared it to the one in the app. It didn't match, not even close. "This isn't our ride," I told her, but she was too far gone to care. She was already walking toward the driver's side window. I followed close behind. She leaned down and asked, "Are you here for Sarah?" The man in the car, middle-aged, dark hair, hollow eyes, nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I'm your driver." No smile, no friendliness, just flat assurance. I stepped in. "That's not the right license plate," I said more firmly now. "This isn't our car." Sarah, still swaying slightly, looked confused. "But he says he's our driver." I felt the tension in my jaw tighten. "He's not," I said. "He says the plate is wrong because he changed it this morning." The man looked at me now, met my eyes. His expression didn't change. I didn't flinch. I took a step closer, pulled out my phone and said loudly, "Hey, I'm filming you." I wasn't filming, not yet, but the bluff worked. He stared for a moment longer, then quickly pulled away. Tires scraped against the icy pavement as the car disappeared into the dark. A few seconds later, our actual Uber pulled up. Right license plate, right car, different driver, friendly smile. We all got in, the mood a little shaken but still riding on the fuzzy edge of alcohol and New Year's euphoria. Everyone wanted to keep the good vibes going, to move past the near miss like it hadn't really happened. But I couldn't forget it. I sat in the back seat, quietly playing the moment over in my head. The man's dead stare, his insistence, the way he tried to grab Sarah's arm when she opened the door. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a setup, a trap. And I kept thinking, what if I hadn't said anything? What if I'd been drunk too? What if Sarah had gotten into that car alone? We would never have seen her again. Later that night, when we were all safe and home, I decided to call the police. I was under 21, technically not supposed to be drinking, but I didn't care. If there was even the smallest chance of stopping that man from trying again, I had to take it. I told them everything. The fake plate, the matching name, the way he insisted he was our driver, the grab, the escape. To my surprise, they took it seriously. They found him. We never got the full story, never found out what he... I wonder where he would have taken her, or how many times he'd tried something like that before. But they caught him, before he could try again. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't checked the plate, if Sarah had opened the door just a second faster, if I'd hesitated. That night, something in me shifted. A quiet awareness, a deeper sense of vigilance. I still go out, still take ride shares, but I check the plates, I watch for stickers, I make eye contact with the driver before opening the door. I don't care if it makes me seem paranoid, because when you're standing in the cold, late at night, with nothing but a gut feeling and a flickering porch light, that instinct might be the only thing between you and something you never come back from. And if you're ever wondering whether it's okay to be the one who overreacts, let me tell you now, it is. It always is. Story 6. It was late November. Cold rain tapped steadily against the windows of the apartment I'd just left. The kind of rain that makes the streets feel slick and endless, turning reflections into smudged blurs and headlights into slow ghostly beams. It was just after 2 a.m. and I'd come from my ex-boyfriend's place on the other side of town. We had finally ended things, not officially this time. It wasn't angry or dramatic, just the quiet kind of sad that settles in your bones and leaves you hollow. Like walking away from something you once thought might matter forever. I stood under a dim streetlight, phone in hand, staring at the screen as I requested an Uber. All I wanted was to go home, crawl into bed and disappear into sleep. The rain crept down my coat collar, cold against my skin. I just wanted to feel safe again. The car arrived a few minutes later. A dark sedan, older model, already misted over from the cold. I slid into the back seat, my mind still full of the breakup, the final words, the shared silence, the relief and sadness fighting each other in my chest. The driver was a tall, thin man, maybe late 20s, messy hair, unshaven face, dark rings under his eyes. His car was noticeably dirty, not just a little cluttered, grimy, like it hadn't been cleaned in months. The dashboard was dusty, the rearview mirror had smudges, and I noticed an odd smell lingering, like cheap cologne masking something sour. Still, I told myself not to be judgmental. People have hard days. Maybe he was just working late like me. We pulled away from the curb, the rain a soft hiss beneath the tires. At first, he was quiet. I kept my eyes out the window, watching the city blur past. But then I noticed something. He kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Not once or twice, every few seconds. Quick little flicks of his eyes that didn't feel casual. They felt calculating, like he was watching for something, waiting for something. I told myself to ignore it. Maybe he was just trying to see the road behind him. Maybe it was nothing. Then he spoke. "You're beautiful," he said, as if we were already mid-conversation. I blinked, startled. Thanks," I said quietly, trying not to sound startled. There was a long pause, and then he asked, "What's your name?" I hesitated. My name was already on the Uber app, so I gave it. I figured there was no point in lying. His response chilled me. "That's a hot name," he said. "I've always wanted to sleep with a girl named that." I didn't respond. My mouth opened, then closed again. I looked down at my phone and pretended to scroll. The mood in the car shifted instantly, like the air had thickened. My heart beat a little faster. I tried to stay calm. He started talking again, asking more questions, rambling, but not like someone making conversation. It was like he was building a script in his head, one that didn't require my participation. "Do you have a boyfriend?" he asked. "Yes," I said quickly. "He's waiting for me at home." He snorted. "That's a shame. I wanted you for myself." I stayed silent. "But I don't care about your boyfriend," he added. "We can go somewhere else. You should change the address in the app. I know a spot. Quiet. We can hang out, smoke a joint." "No," I said firmly. "Please just take me to the address in the app." He didn't respond. He reached down and fiddled with something on the console. Then the music changed. A local rap song I'd never heard before. The lyrics were jarring, explicit, aggressive, the kind of lyrics that made my skin crawl. Descriptions of what he'd do to a woman during sex. It didn't feel like a coincidence. He turned the volume up. "You hear that?" he said. "That's how it would be with me. You'd be begging for more." I froze. I didn't know what to say. My fingers were trembling on my phone. I began texting my ex-boyfriend, telling him what was happening, partly to alert someone and partly to have a reason not to engage with the driver. I didn't want to look up. I didn't want him to see my fear. "You think I'm lying?" he said suddenly. "What do you think about that?" I didn't reply. "I asked you a question," he snapped, his voice louder now. I swallowed. I'd never heard that song before. He grinned. "You will." He started talking again, more about sex, about how good he was, about how I'd come back for him. His tone kept shifting between seductive and threatening. I tried to stay still, give short answers, not provoke anything. Then he asked, "You smoke weed?" "No." "Come on, smoke a joint with me. It'll be fun." "No, thank you." "You home alone?" he asked. "I could come in for a bit, chill with you." "Show you what I'm talking about." My heart was pounding now. My fingers typed faster. I was messaging my ex, telling him exactly what was going on. He told me to start saying things out loud, to mention where I was, say someone was waiting for me, anything to let the driver know someone was aware of my location. So I did. "Yeah, I'm almost home," I said, loud enough for him to hear. "My mum's texting, she's up waiting for me. I'll call her when I'm inside." That changed something. He grew quieter, fidgety, still watching me in the mirror but less talkative. The car turned down the final stretch toward my apartment. When we finally pulled up, I practically jumped out of the vehicle. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my bag, muttered thanks, and made my way to the door of my building. I didn't go inside, not right away. I stood in the dark of the stairwell, out of view, watching. He hadn't left. He sat in the car, engine still running, staring at the front of the building, waiting. I didn't dare go up the stairs. The hallway lights would have given me away. If he saw what floor I went to, he'd know where I lived. I waited. Still. Silent. After 5 minutes, he slowly pulled away. I climbed the stairs in complete darkness and slipped into my apartment without turning on a single light. I didn't want to risk being seen through the windows. I peeked out through a gap in the curtain and watched. A few minutes later, he came back. This time he parked. He sat there for nearly 40 minutes. I received a message on my phone. It wasn't from Uber. It was a new number. I'm outside. Come down. Just want to talk. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. How did he have my number? I didn't reply. Another message came in. Then another. Just one cigarette. Talk with me. I want to hear you breathe. Then the phone started ringing. I didn't answer. I blocked the number. I peeked through the curtains again. He was still there. When the call didn't go through, I watched him slam his phone against the steering wheel, again and again. Then finally, he drove away. I stayed up for hours staring at the street. Every car that passed made me jump. The next day, he texted me again, this time from another number. I blocked that one too. Then another text came nearly a year later, just one. I blocked it and he's never contacted me again. I reported everything to Uber. I never found out what they did, if they removed him, if he was banned. I hope he was. But the way he acted, I couldn't help but feel like I wasn't the first. And that's the part that still gets to me. He was too confident, too rehearsed. Like this was a script he'd used before. I still take rides sometimes, but not alone, not late. And I always check the license plate. Because sometimes a 30-minute ride with the wrong person can stretch into a nightmare that stays with you forever. Story 7. It started as a celebration. A quiet one meant only for close friends. 5 of us. 2 couples and me had decided to rent a secluded cabin deep in the Pacific Northwest for a long weekend. The idea was to escape everything: work, noise, cell phones and stress. Just nature, trees, a fire pit and wine under the stars. We'd been planning it for weeks, and when the time finally came, the excitement was thick, that gentle kind of buzz you get when you know you're about to disappear from the world for a while. The cabin was beautiful, rustic but well-maintained, perched at the edge of a dense pine forest with a narrow trail leading to a quiet lake. It had all the charm of a postcard, a wraparound porch, a stone chimney, and those old timber walls that creaked softly when the wind blew. No cell signal, no Wi-Fi, no neighbors in sight. It felt perfect. We arrived in the late afternoon, settled in, unpacked, and opened our first bottle of wine as the sun dipped low behind the trees. The air smelled like damp moss and wood smoke. Someone put on music. Someone else lit a fire in the pit outside. It was one of those evenings where everything feels light and effortless, the kind you want to trap in a jar and open on rainy days. We ate, we drank, we laughed. Around midnight, we moved inside and settled in the living room, wrapped in blankets, sipping the last of our wine. The fire crackled behind the glass door of the fireplace, casting shadows that danced across the wooden walls. Someone started telling ghost stories. Silly ones, the kind people tell just to make each other laugh. Nothing serious. But then, something changed. I don't remember who noticed it first. Maybe it was the couple sitting nearest the kitchen. But we all heard it eventually. Footsteps. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Crunching through the gravel near the side of the house. We all went still. The fire popped. The music had been turned off earlier. The only sound in the room was our breath, held and shallow. Someone stood up and walked to the front window, parting the curtain just enough to peer through. "There's someone out there," she whispered. The rest of us crowded around. Through the trees, partially obscured by branches and darkness, was a figure, a man, standing just at the edge of the woods, watching the house, not moving, not approaching, just standing there. We stared in stunned silence. It didn't make sense. There were no other cabins nearby, no hiking trails, nothing that would explain someone being this deep in the woods at 1 a.m. We turned off the lights, one by one, until the house went dark. Only the flickering light of the fireplace remained. The man didn't move. He just kept watching. Eventually he stepped back into the woods and disappeared. We didn't sleep well that night. Nobody said it out loud, but we were all afraid. We double-checked the doors and windows, made sure the fire was out, and slept in every creak in the walls, felt, amplified. Every whisper of wind against the glass had us wide-eyed and silent. The next morning, things felt almost normal again. The sunlight had washed away the fear. It seemed ridiculous in the light of day. A random hiker, maybe. A hunter who'd gotten lost. We tried to shake it off. We made breakfast, joked about it, laughed at ourselves for being spooked. But when we went outside, we found something, the footprints. Deep ones, leading from the woods straight to the side of the house, stopping just beneath one of the windows. Then, nothing. Like whoever it was had turned and walked back the same way. No vehicle tracks, no dog prints, just one pair of boots coming and going. That day we stayed close to the cabin. Nobody felt like hiking. The forest didn't feel welcoming anymore. It felt like it was hiding something, like we were being watched. That night it happened again. We were more prepared this time. We kept the lights low, pulled the curtains tight. But still, around the same time, just after midnight, we heard it, the sound of someone walking outside. This time, they didn't linger near the trees. They circled the cabin. We could hear the gravel shifting, sticks snapping, footsteps moving slowly from one side of the house to the other. Once again, someone peeked through the curtain. "He's closer now," she said, her voice shaking. We all looked. He was standing in the side yard, maybe 20 feet from the porch, just standing there, facing the house, still not moving, no flashlight, no backpack, no reason to be there. We debated what to do. We didn't have cell signal. The nearest ranger station was miles away. It would take time to get there, and none of us wanted to leave the others behind. Eventually, we turned on the porch light. The man was gone. Again, we didn't sleep. The next morning, we decided to leave early, cut the trip short. It wasn't worth staying another night. We packed everything up in silence. The woods felt hostile now, the trees too dense, the shadows too deep. As we pulled away from the cabin, I looked back one last time. There at the edge of the forest, half hidden behind a tree, he was watching us leave. He hadn't come closer. He never tried to enter the house. He didn't speak. He didn't approach. He just stood there, night after night, as if waiting for something or someone. We never reported it, never contacted the rental company. Maybe we were afraid it would sound too strange. Maybe we didn't want to relive it, or maybe we all secretly knew that there wouldn't be anything to report. No broken windows, no property damage, just a man, a silent man in the woods, standing too close for comfort. Months passed. We tried to forget, but then, almost a year later, one of us found something. She was browsing online listings looking for a new cabin to rent for an upcoming holiday. As she scrolled through photos, she gasped. There it was. The cabin. Same porch, same stone chimney, same dense forest behind it. But the listing wasn't for our trip. It was an older listing. The timestamp said it had been inactive for 3 years, and the owner had left. A strange note in the comments before deactivating it. Cabin no longer for rent. Too many strange incidents. Would not recommend overnight stays. Do not engage with anyone near the property after dark. We hadn't booked that cabin through an official site. A friend had found it through a local connection, someone who knew someone. Now we started to wonder, had we been given the wrong cabin? Or had we stayed somewhere that was never meant to be occupied again? I don't know who the man was. A drifter? A hermit? A ghost? I don't know. But what keeps me awake at night isn't just that he came close. It's that he never tried to force his way in. He didn't need to. He waited, watched, like he knew eventually someone else would come along, and when they did, he'd still be there. Story 8. I used to work night shifts as a security guard for a high-rise office building downtown. The kind of job that's more about presence than action. Show up, walk the halls, check the cameras, make sure nobody's trying to break in or sneak out with a laptop. Most nights were quiet, boring even. I'd sip bag coffee, read books I never finished, and stare out at the city lights from the top floor, wondering how many stories each office window held. The glow of fluorescent light on empty desks, the faint hum of electronics still running. It was peaceful in a strange way, like watching a city breathe in its sleep. The building was newer than it looked, sleek glass and sharp lines, but beneath the polish there was something tired about it. The way the elevators creaked just a little too much, the way some lights flickered when you walked by, the way the heat never quite reached certain hallways. And then there was the room, Suite 6B. No one ever went in or out of that office. It sat halfway down the 6th floor hallway, tucked between a marketing firm and a software company, but it didn't belong to either of them. The door was always locked, the windows dark, no signage, no name, just a silver number plate and a motionless doorknob. At first, I didn't think much of it. Every building has its quirks, storage closets, unused suites, offices between leases, but 6B felt different. I remember the first time I passed it during rounds. I was doing my usual sweep of the 6th floor, clipboard in hand, humming softly to myself just to break the silence. I turned the corner and something made me stop. The hallway was dimmer there. The overhead light just outside 6B always buzzed faintly, a low electric drone that felt more like tinnitus than sound. I passed it without hesitation the first few nights, but I couldn't help but notice that every time I walked by I felt watched. Not the way you feel when someone's standing behind you, the way you feel when someone's standing behind the wall. I shrugged it off, of course. The mind plays tricks in silence, especially in a building designed to be full of people, now empty. But then I noticed something else. The door to 6B was locked. Always, but on the 10th night of my shift it was slightly ajar, not wide open, just barely cracked, a sliver, enough to see a shadow shift inside. I froze. Every instinct told me to call someone, but protocol said to investigate, so against better judgment I stepped forward. "Security," I called out, voice firm, trying to hide the unease I felt. "Anyone in there?" No answer. I pushed the door open slowly. It creaked, like something in an old house, not a modern office. The lights inside were off. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped in. The room was empty. No desks, no chairs, no equipment, just a wide, hollow space, carpeted, bare walls, a single vent in the ceiling, and a faint smell, like damp paper and dust, but no signs of anyone inside. No place to hide, no broken locks, no draft that could have opened the door. I checked the corners, the ceiling tiles, even tapped the walls. Nothing. I shut the door behind me and logged the incident. But when I returned to the floor a few hours later during my second sweep, the door was open again. This time, wider. The next day I told the building manager. He looked surprised when I mentioned the suite. Said he wasn't even sure who leased it anymore. It had been locked for years, he thought. Some old corporate firm had gone bankrupt and left it mid-contract. He promised to check the records and have maintenance make sure the lock was working. We both brushed it off as something mechanical, but that night I received a call from the front desk phone, which was impossible. I was alone. I answered, heart thudding, silence. Then, breathing, slow, measured, like someone was inches from the receiver. I hung up, made my way to the lobby in record time. The desk was empty, as it should have been. The phone line was off the hook. When I put it back in place, it immediately rang again. This time, I didn't answer. I went back to 6B. The door was open. Inside, I found something new. A chair, right in the center of the room. Old, wooden, facing the far wall. I hadn't seen it before. It definitely hadn't been there, and on the wall opposite it, in faint pencil, were tally marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds. I backed out of the room, shut the door and jammed a chair under the handle. I didn't leave my post again that night. The next morning I called in sick. I took the next few days off trying to forget it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I'd imagined it. Stress can do strange things. But something told me it wasn't in my head. Something about the weight of the silence in that room. The precise lines of the tally marks. The way the chair had been perfectly centered, like it had been waiting. I returned the following week. Same building. Same floor. Suite 6B's door was now bolted shut. A metal bracket had been screwed into the frame, like someone wanted to be absolutely certain it couldn't be opened again. The lights in the hallway still buzzed, still flickered, but the air felt heavier now, like the building itself had decided to hold its breath. The manager never said anything. I didn't ask. Weeks passed. Then one night I came in to start my shift, and another guard was there. Relief rotation, they said. Management wants eyes on all shifts now. Weird things have been happening. I didn't ask what kind. But on my next solo round, I passed by 6B again, and I swear I heard it, scraping, just on the other side of the door, like a chair dragging slowly across carpet.